Like the Israelites 3,000 years ago, Bassem Yusuf also had to flee Egypt because of persecution. But instead of reflecting on the society that vomited him out and forced him to run away, he went down the easier route and started criticizing Israel instead. In the last video I made about him, I talked about the sweet little lies he had told in various interviews, like the lie that Israel had pushed 1 million Arabs into Gaza over the last 30 years, or that he had never met his wife's family in Gaza because of Israel, although Gaza and Egypt have had their own border with no Israelis in the way for like 20 years. In this video, I want to tackle his biggest lie, the one that lies at the root of it all, and that is his lie regarding the creation of the State of Israel. I'm doing this because this lie is commonly heard throughout the Muslim world. To be fair here, I will say that I don't think that he is intentionally lying. He just doesn't know what he's talking about. He's just echoing the false narrative that prevails in the Muslim world. Let's hear it from him.
The people in the West, especially in England, it's like, there are too many Jews. We need a solution. The solution for what? For the Jewish problem. So it's like we need to get rid of them. And you know what? Palestine was not even in the A list. Palestine was in the B list. Because England proposed 6,000 square miles in Uganda for the Jews, 1903. And the reason why Palestine was not on the list, that it was objected by a lot of rabbis that said, like, it's a promised land, but only when the Messiah comes. But there were other options, Argentina, South Africa, Uganda, Madagascar. And eventually, they said, all right, let's do Palestine.
I will start with the biggest lie in this video. Bassem says that Palestine was not even on the A list. Like, what? I mean, he is right. Palestine was not on any A list because the Jews didn't even have a list. For the Jews, there is only one place, the land of Israel. It is in our name. We are called Jews because we are from Judea, which is the mountains around Jerusalem, just as the Arabs are from Arabia, or modern-day Saudi Arabia. And this nonsense about rabbis objecting the land of Israel, never in the history of Judaism has a Kohen, a Jewish priest, or a rabbi said that Jews shouldn't live in the land of Israel. Few small and very extreme ultra-Orthodox Jewish groups are against the secular character of the modern state of Israel. Still, even these groups have followers in Israel. Now with this thing about Uganda, I remember when I first heard that non-Israelis were talking about this. I was really impressed. I wondered, how do they know about this little plan from 1903? If you take the history of modern Zionism, let's say from 1882 to 1948, the Uganda plan would not be a chapter, but maybe a footnote. It took me a while to understand why this detail is even known and being talked about. For the anti-Zionist, this is a way of saying, you Jews don't have to go to Palestine. You could have gone to Uganda. So let me set the record straight. If anything, the Uganda plan proves that for the Jews, there is only one option, and that is the land of Israel. At the beginning of the 20th century, the land of Israel was held by the Ottomans, the Turks. Herzl tried to talk to the Turks to agree to a Jewish state in the land of Israel, but he failed. So he tried to talk to the Germans about it, as the German Empire was an ally of the Turks. He failed again. In 1903, there was a pogrom against the Jews in Kishinev in the Russian Empire, and in the city of Taza in Morocco. Yes, you heard me right. There was a series of pogroms against Jews in Morocco, and dozens of Jews were murdered. Herzl met with the British, and they offered to settle the Jews in Uganda, in a region which today, by the way, is in Kenya. Herzl brought the offer back to the Zionist Congress and said, Jews are being murdered. Let's have a temporary settlement where Jews can be safe for now, and wait and see what happens to the Ottoman Empire, which at the time was very weak. Even this proposal was rejected by the Zionist Congress. So the Uganda plan, or better say, the rejection of the Uganda plan, is actually a testament to the importance of the land of Israel to the Jews. Bassem mentions some other places that are not really worth talking about. But the funny thing, or rather the sad thing, is that he mentioned Madagascar as an option for a Jewish state. Bassem, I hope that you are watching. Madagascar was put forward by the Nazis in their 1938 plan to deport the Jews. Bassem, you're an Egyptian comedian. Stick to comedy, and if you want to talk about history and politics, why not start with your country? I mean, the country that kicked you out, Egypt.
So suddenly, from our perspective, the Jewish problem is not a Jewish problem, is not a Middle Eastern problem, is not an Arab problem, it is a European problem. It was pushed on us together with the guilt because now we are the anti-Semite. Now we are the Jewish hater. And not just that, they took land. So people look at this like, why are we even, we had a lot of refugees coming in. And during that, there was a lot of, as you know, Zionist militia, the Aragon, the Haganah, all of these people were killing Palestinians.
This is a very common perception in the Muslim world that resonates with the guilt of Europeans over colonialism. The Jewish problem is framed as a European problem that the Europeans simply pass on to the Middle East at the expense of the local Arabs. First of all, don't call the Jews a problem. Wherever there are Jews, you will find success and prosperity. The problem is not the Jews, but that some societies have problems dealing with a successful minority like the Jews. A society that accepts the Jews flourishes. I know that this is a very broad statement, and maybe you can find the odd exception, but all in all, it holds truth. If the Jews are under threat, if the Jews are living, then it is a really bad sign. Israel was not created to solve a Jewish problem. Israel was created because the land of Israel is and was and has been the only Jewish homeland for the Jews for the last 3,000 years. And because European societies, like Muslim societies, can't handle a successful minority like the Jews. And it is important to emphasize that the Jews were suffering in all Muslim countries, from Morocco to Iran. I've made a video about that too, so be sure to check it out. But you actually don't have to watch this video. You can also just look at what is happening today in Muslim societies. All minorities in Muslim countries, Christians, Yazidis, Baha'i, Balak, Hindu, Buddhist, and blacks, are suffering under Islam. Don't agree with me? Feel free to give me an example of minorities that are thriving in Muslim countries today. And Bassem Youssef knows this from his own experience. There is an ancient Egyptian saying, first they come after the Jews, then they go after the comedians. And Bassem, you were thrown out of your Muslim country, and where did you go? You could have gone to any other Muslim country where you understand the language and the culture, yet you chose the West, the US, because you know that I am right, that if free speech is important to you, that if you want to make fun of the government, that if you are an open-minded person who likes to think out loud and express their thoughts, then you had better get the hell out of a Muslim country. From Bassem, I didn't expect much, but from Piers Morgan, I did expect better journalism. But he just lets Bassem talk endlessly about things he doesn't know about, and then he says,
to what happened in 48. To me, it's pretty clear 700, 800,000 Palestinians were displaced from their homes, and it should never have happened. And that has been absolutely, I think, the root cause for so much resentment.
700,000 Arabs should never have been displaced, and this is the root cause of so much resentment. What was the cause of the Arabs leaving their homes? Maybe it was the fact that they said no to the two-state solution offered by the UN, and they went on to start a war to eliminate the Jews on the 30th of November 1947. And by the way, back then, like today, they began with killing civilians. Piers, if you were talking about World War II, would the first thing you said about the war be that 7 million Germans shouldn't have died in this terrible war, and that the Germans paid too high a price? Probably not, because A, until 3 seconds ago, you didn't even know that 7 million Germans had died in World War II, and B, if you start a war in a bid to conquer land and kill all the Jews, you might just lose and you might have to pay a price for it. The Germans had 7 million dead, 14 million refugees, 25% of their land was taken away from them, and they were divided for 40 years. The thing is that the Germans have learned their lesson and know that they were in the wrong. The Arabs didn't learn their lesson and are still trying to eliminate Israel. This was true in 1943, it was true in 1948, and it is still true today. Did all the Arabs want to destroy Israel? No, of course not. But our government never represents 100% of the people. Hamas is by far the leading Palestinian movement. And in the Hamas covenant, it clearly states right at the start, Israel will exist and will continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it. Interestingly enough, the word Islam is mentioned 136 times in their lovely document, while Israel is mentioned 4 times, and the term Palestinian state is mentioned 0 times. Piers Morgan put a lot of effort into this interview. He flew all the way to the US for it. I don't think he has flown to any other person for an interview in his current show. Too bad he didn't put in the intellectual effort to ask serious questions and stop Bassem from talking nonsense for almost 2 hours. My next videos will be about Greater Israel, the secret Israeli plan to take over the world, and another one about the leader of the Arabs in Palestine in 1948. Have you noticed that the Palestinians never mention him? There is a very good reason why. And I will also go back to making videos about Jerusalem, some non-political videos. I really want to make them, but I always end up postponing them because, well, we are at war. And I think that these videos are more important right now. I believe that we all need to do whatever we can. The war is now entering its 2nd year, and it is hard to maintain the generosity and the energy for volunteering that was there in the beginning. But there are still so many people in need. In English, the word charity originates from the word love. And in Hebrew, the word for charity is tzedakah, which comes from the word tzedek, or the right thing to do. Even if you don't feel like doing it, you still do it because it is the right thing to do. In a previous video, I talked about Meir Panim, which is a charity that provides support to Israeli soldiers and families. If you want to do the right thing, you can volunteer in their centers if you are in Israel, or you can, of course, donate. They are helping the 100,000 families that have been displaced from the north, and they are supporting the IDF soldiers and families that have fallen into poverty. On the news, you don't hear much about the financial cost of the war and how it affects families. I see how my industry, the tourism industry, has been entirely shut down because of the war, and lots of businesses have gone bankrupt. They are also continuing to support Holocaust survivors, just as they did before the war. If you can do the right thing, then please do it. The link will be here below. See you next week. Yalla bye.